2019 into session. The first order on the agenda is public comment. Is there any public comment? Yes, sir, Mr. Swan. You would come up, identify yourself for the microphone at the folks at home. Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Jeff. How are you?
Thank you, Mr. Swan.
Thanks.
Jeff Swan, 132 Pleasant Street, Clinton, Massachusetts. Board members, thank you for your time to speak. As we are fast approaching the town meeting and with its town budget, I want to bring to the awareness of the town some changes in the auto industry, which could, and in my opinion, should have some impact on the ongoing purchase of vehicles. In this case, specifically police vehicles. The following is an extraction from the article by CarPro. Ford says the new Interceptor has an EPA estimated rating of 24 miles per gallon, combined with a 41% improvement over the current police Interceptor utility, equipped with a 3.7-liter gas engine. It is estimated to save between $3,500 and $5,700 per vehicle annually in the fuel cost versus the current model. That number was computed using a full cost of $275 to $450 per gallon. The question of performance does appear to have addressed as well. This is extracted from an article by Road and Track. Michigan State Police tested the hybrid Interceptor in a 0 to 100 acceleration, fastest lap, fastest average lap, and highest top speed, 137 miles per hour if you were curious. It clocked a 0 to 60 time frame of 6.9 seconds and a top speed of 137 miles per hour. These technical advancements seem to herald an era where we can have the power performance required and still attain a better carbon footprint. A win-win for us all. I propose the town make a commitment to hybrids for the cars we purchase in 2019 and beyond. There are hyperlinks to the referenced articles in the e-copy of the document. Should you wish, I can email them to you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Swan.
Oh, and if I have one more second. I'm sure you already know this, but as a passing piece of notice, Leicester received $193,000 in its first tax payment from Cultivate, one of the first recreational marijuana stores to open in Massachusetts. That's $193,000 over a 3-month period.
Right.
Just a point of reference.
Okay. Next item on the, any other public comment? Being none, next item on the agenda is the review of minutes for April 3rd, 2019. What's the pleasure of the board?
Motion to approve the minutes as presented, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion's made to approve the minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion's carried. Item 3 on the agenda is a utility pole installation public hearing on Haskell Ave, National Grid wishes to install a new utility pole on Haskell Avenue beginning at a point approximately 27 feet northeast of the center line of the intersection of Beach Street. A new stub pole with anchor will be installed on the northeast corner of Beach Street and Haskell Avenue. So is there someone here from National Grid, young lady, if you would step forward and speak into the microphone, tell us your name and just tell us a little bit about this request.
Yes, sir. My name is Laura Napolitano. So basically what we need to do, like you said, is put the stub pole. So what we're doing is we're adding we're increasing the size of a transformer on the next pole down from pole 10, so that'd be pole 9. And we're also increasing the height, I believe, on some of these poles. So because we have 3-phase going down Beach and then a 3-phase tap down Haskell, we need to put the stub pole across the street to support the weight of that line, those 2 spans, and then the anchor to support the stub pole.
Okay. Do members of the board have any questions? There's no questions. As this is a public hearing, we would invite anyone up who wishes to speak in favor of this request. Appears to be no one. We would invite anyone up to speak against it. Again, doesn't seem to be anyone. So we'll close the public hearing and ask the board what is their wishes with regard to this request.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the request.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to approve the request to put in a new utility pole on Haskell Avenue. Is there any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Y'all have a nice one.
Next item on the agenda is Mr. Matt Kobus. He's coming to us from the Fuller Field Commission and wishes to discuss the proposed fence along Worcester Street. And the Department of Public Works completed the debris cleanup on Worcester Street last week and are now getting prices for fencing to protect the embankment from further illegal dumping. However, Matt Kobus from the Fuller Field Commission requested to meet with the Board of Selectmen to discuss not erecting a fence at this time since it might interfere with future parking expansions plans for their facility. Mr. Kobus.
Matt Kovas, Chairman, Fuller Field Commission. So we're not opposed to a fence being erected. That wasn't why I was coming. What I was hoping to do is basically coordinate our vision for Fuller Field as well as the scope of work with the debris cleanup. One of the things that when we seek grants, we're told that we just don't have the parking that's down there. So this past season, we completed an existing conditions report and a boundary report for the Fuller Field property. And now that we have that, Mr. Karlstad has taken on looking to see where we might be able to expand parking. According to Mr. Duffy, he said the ideal number is about 100 parking spots. So by maybe pushing the embankment back a little bit, we might be able to get additional parking there. So I wasn't aware of, I had reached out to Mr. McGowan just about an idea as to where the fencing was gonna go, so that way, rather than have the fence erected, then, bring this forward, I figured to do it ahead of time, so then that way, maybe we can find something that satisfies both. I had mentioned in writing that we've looked at installing surveillance cameras along Worcester Street, so that way we might be able to identify and even deter anyone that's throwing garbage over the side. And that's where I'm at.
Okay. I see Mr. McGowan in the audience. Mr. McGowan, would you care to sort of fill us in?
I mean, that's fine.
First, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the cleanup.
Yeah, the cleanup, it went better than I expected it to. It was difficult. It's a very, very steep bank. Some spots it's probably a 1-to-1 banking, and actually with the dumping in some areas it's a little bit steeper than that. But it really did go fairly smoothly. So in a couple of days we took out about 40 yards of trash, including anything you could imagine, but a lot of chairs and sofas and mattresses, probably about 60 tires we took out of there, and a lot of just litter. A lot of it, there was a lot of water bottles and Gatorade bottles, I'm assuming, kids or whatever coming off of the field. The entire surface was littered with bottles as well, water bottles for the most part. And we cleaned up. I mean, we didn't get the thing 100% cleaned up. It'd be impossible to do that. But we got it, I'd say 90 to 95% of everything down there is now picked up. And anything else really is just too dangerous. It's just such a steep embankment, and trying to pull stuff out that's buried and been buried. I'm sure this is going on for years and years and years. It could be 50 years worth of debris down there, but it looks a lot better than it did. And then as far as the fence is concerned, I do understand there's obviously a shortage of parking down there without any question, but I think without putting the fence back up, we're going to obviously be back to where we started. And even surveillance cameras, like kids aren't going to care about surveillance. They're going to be throwing water bottles over there day one. I mean, the one thing about a fence is it's, I'm not saying that a fence is cheap to put up, but it's cheap to take back down, roll it back up. If there's something where they wanted to add something or do maybe a little bit of a wall, it'd be a difficult build. And, you know, I'm not saying nothing's impossible, but could always move the fence out later if there was some kind of a plan to make that shoulder a little bit wider. But I really am not comfortable with cleaning that banking up again. It really, it's because of how steep it is.
Right.
You know, you're asking for trouble, you're asking for an injury without question to go down that bank, up and down that bank. It was very difficult, and I think I'll definitely could go down there and meet with Matt and whoever he wants to down there, and we could kind of like pick where the fence could go for now, give them areas to be able to utilize, because there are some flat areas that'll be able to be utilized that we could kind of go around and leave those open. But I think a fence, to me, you know, sooner is better, because we don't want to have to go down that banking again. And you can always, like I said, roll a fence back up again and reuse it. They're not, it's going to be a, you know, a commercial grade fence, so it wouldn't be something that's going to get ruined, and you can just roll it up, move it, or reuse it, or use it somewhere else. But we don't want to have to do this again without question. I mean, you obviously,
Yeah, absolutely.
It's brutal.
No, you're absolutely right.
But I think I could just walk it with them, and we could, you know, spray paint some spots in it and say, okay, let's put the fence up here for now, and then figure out later if these guys ever, you know, if they ever do come up with the plan to be able to, you know, push that back a little bit.
Yeah.
It'd be tough, as you know.
Absolutely, that I agree 100%.
Mr. Iacobucci,
Yeah, I just,
do you want?
No, Mark, go ahead.
Go ahead.
just wanted to commend Chris and the DPW for all their hard work. I know it was, like you say, it was very treacherous down there. You're on a 90-degree slope. So thank you for all your effort. You know, I tend to agree with Chris. Obviously, we need to put a fence there. I'd hate to see us, you know, have to go back down there anytime soon. And I think higher the fence, the better. If we can get something that's high that can prevent, you know, heavy stuff from going over the fence,
Yeah.
that's better too. And I also think surveillance cameras is a great idea as well too. I think, you know, more defense we have, the better. And I wouldn't say just in that area, I would say in some trouble spots around town, that I think the town really should look at that, because I think it is preventive, to get, you know, surveillance cameras up and start protecting the town more. But I just wanted to thank Chris and the DPW again, because I know that wasn't an easy cleanup. It was a lot of work. I know there was some heavy equipment you had to get down there
Yeah,
to pull that stuff up. It was a lot of logistics, so just appreciate the effort.
Thank you.
And I think that's where, in looking at Worcester Street, we've tried cutting that brush back as far as we can to create a line of sight all the way down where the residents are, all the way up. You know, I don't know how much of a deterrent that is, but at least.
Yeah, and I think it's something down the
not
road that
hidden.
it's something that, like Chris says too, I think if you need the parking, and, you know, we can expand the parking, great, we can, you know, roll up the fence and put the fence in different areas if we need be, but, I don't think it's, you know, all or nothing. I think we
I think
can.
even if you do parking, you're gonna want the fence back up.
Yeah,
anyway.
Right.
So if
absolutely
you do it,
right.
you know,
Right,
we do
right.
the parking, even if it's a
Exactly.
wall that you had, Bill, you
Right.
could put it on top of the wall or in front of the
Yep.
wall, reuse the fencing, because you're gonna have the same problem. with
I think it's very workable, you know,
Yeah.
absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Conlon?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say that I agree with most of what Selectman Iacobucci said, and with Chris and Matt. I want to thank Chris and the DPW and the specific employees who went down that embankment and helped
I
drag
did
all
not.
that.
Maybe I went down once.
But I want to thank them personally for the effort that they put into doing a job that, I remember when we started talking about this, how we're going to do it. With the crane, with baskets, how we're going to do it. I want to thank Matt for the leadership he's displayed on the Fuller Field Commission and the forward thinking and the investment of his own personal time and energy into not just Fuller Field, into other recreational facilities around town. You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
That all said, I'm strongly opposed to the idea of not putting up a continuous fence along that property.
Yep.
Every day that goes by without that fence is an open invitation to illegal dumping. And cameras may help us catch who dumps, but it won't stop the illegal dumping, and it won't stop the need for somebody else to go back down that embankment to clean it up. I went down there this afternoon just to take a look at the progress that had been made, and I'm not just concerned about the illegal dumping, I'm very concerned about the public safety hazard of that the town has as an exposure with that embankment being accessible to children anybody else. Before parking could be permitted on that site, on that side of the street, a lot of work is gonna need to be done. Because any kid getting out of a car could, I raised 5 kids, I know how quickly they wander and disappear and where'd he go? And that embankment is a severe slope. If somebody were to fall accidentally and roll down that hill, there's all kinds of impalement types of situations with sticks sticking up and who knows what else is down there. I think the town has an exposure, not just on both accounts. We should get a fence up. If you want to put a gate here or a gate there, incorporate a gate, but don't leave it open. Don't leave it an open invitation until there's a real parking lot there or a real plan. And I'm not being dismissive of the effort of putting the fence up and then taking it down, but I don't see progress being made to the point where the fence is an impediment to the project, the future project, for 5 years. I mean, by the time you develop a plan and go through the permitting process, if it can even be done, you're within the wetlands area, you need Concom approval, you need all kinds of engineering, and then how do you build a wall there to keep the embankment from settling and going downhill? I don't think it's a waste of time or money to put the fence up now, and if there's a plan and it's executable and there's funding for it or a grant for it, then we can incorporate relocating the fence at that point.
Right.
But I think it's a severe public safety hazard and an open invitation to illegal dumping if we don't get that fence up. That's my opinion.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Kennedy.
I'll echo, I won't take a lot of time, I'll echo the compliments to DPW, and I appreciate you coming and getting in front of this, because we all want what's best for Fuller Field, and I think looking at what we want to do from the town side and what the commission wants to do, as best as we can mesh that, I think it'd be great. I think a fence is necessary. We go over there, my wife's not from town, and so she's new, there are a lot of things here are new to her that people seem to just shrug off, and and when I told her it was on the agenda tonight, she went off again, because it's a disgrace. And if you're watching at home and you're one of the people who are dumping there and think that, well, that's always how it's done, you're an embarrassment to your town, you're a criminal, and I'm looking forward to the law punishing you as much as possible. It's just, to look down there, it's just horrifying. So thank you for cleaning it up. I'll do anything in our power to keep it clean. A couple things I was wondering, is it 100 parking spots or 100 more parking spots?
I believe the comment was 100 parking spots would be the ideal number.
So do you have a ballpark, like how many more we would need over there?
That's what, so between having, we've discussed hiring a civil engineer to see how many we can fit in.
Yep.
And in the meantime, Mr. Carlstead had offered, he basically kind of get a rough idea. The property boundary at Fuller, was a lot larger than what we were expecting it to come back as.
Yeah.
So there's a couple parcels of land that we didn't realize belonged to Fuller that might actually help in creating those spots as well. But there is the safety issue where people do continue to park on the left side, even as much as we try to deter them from doing so. So that way there is access for emergency vehicles to be able to get down there. So I think just by having the brush cut back the way it is, that will help open it up. But I think you can see where it has been pushed out a bit, where we can, there is room for a little more parking. But I think that initial corner on Worcester Street, there's nothing I don't think we're gonna be able to do with it. So a fence makes complete sense, it makes sense the whole entire way. But we're hoping like a little further down where we can get out of the distance from the Conservation Commission, right? I think there's a little wiggle room there further down, but.
And if, considering the amount of water bottles and Gatorade bottles and small trash, do you think that we're equipped as far as trash containers around the field? Could that be a solution? I don't know if we'll.
Yeah.
Did you ever have any outside the gate? Did they put them outside the gate?
We hadn't. I mean, they're on next to every set of bleachers.
Yep.
There's 2 barrels. There's 2 barrels on the exit, They're all over the place.
Okay, just something that I
But
just-
yes, you know, I think, to your point,
I mean,
you know, it's,
it can never be enough, but yeah, I just, that was an issue maybe, something to think of.
that's a good,
Thanks.
we can try them on the outside as well.
Especially if you put the fence, maybe put them over along there, so
Sure.
you can't hook them over.
Yeah,
But it's a lot of storm doors and
right.
things that are,
It's just awful.
Sofas, upholstered chairs, sofas, we didn't get any refrigerator, but a safe, bunch of
Anything in the safe?
grocery carts. It was unbelievable.
I think Mr. O'Donnell had mentioned,
Tires.
he's doing a little
Lot of
research,
tires.
and he found, there was an article in the item, basically welcoming people to come down and get rid of some trash
I
there.
had a copy of it, yeah.
Really?
It was not to trash, but dumping leaves in the hole and, because they wanted to fill that embankment.
Oh, 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 oh,
Yeah.
oh,
Back then, there was no
That-
conservation commission either, so
Right,
not anymore, that's a no-no.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
I'd like to make a motion to direct the DPW superintendent to meet with Matt or anyone else from the Full Field Commission and review the feasibility of putting in a gate or access way, but to direct him to proceed with the fencing project and to make it continuous to bar the public and the children from having access to that embankment. And, well, that's the motion.
I'll
Okay.
second.
Motion's made and seconded to direct the Director of DPW to work cooperatively with the Fuller Field Commission with regard to the fencing and the possible installation of a gate or gate area. Is there any discussion?
Just under discussion, Mr. Chairman, I also want to say that I'm personally supportive, and I think most of this board would be supportive of any effort to design and implement a parking area that's safe to the public and controlled for illegal dumping.
Yes.
Any other discussion? I have something. Why do we want a gate?
To give Parks and Rec access to the other side of the property
For what purpose?
for parking their own vehicles there if they so chose.
Oh, all right. The reason I'm asking is at one point, a former chairman, when we discussed this fence, suggested a gate so that the Fuller Field Commission could continue dumping down in that area. And I'm opposed to the Fuller Field or anybody else dumping in that area, so.
Yeah, I would suggest that Parks and Rec, I'm sorry, Fuller Field
Right
Commission.
next door.
Well, you wear two hats here, man, so, should make some inquiries with the Conservation Commission about the status of that land, because, it's within the 100-foot buffer, and, any dumping, whether it's leaves, branches, any of that is a prohibited practice without an order of conditions.
Absolutely.
We can take clippings and leaves and all that stuff up at our land, up
Right.
at the landfill
That's
too,
right,
so
yeah.
it's.
Right.
it's
So that's where the clipping
easy
should go.
access and-
All right, so as long as we're understood that it's not there so that
The gate's not there for, dumping
anyone to be
purposes.
dumping.
The grass is cut so often, there is no need for clippings, so,
Yeah, I just-
you know, it's, there really isn't much that is dumped over there at this point. We don't get much leaves.
yeah.
Okay, so the motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Good luck
Thank you very much.
to everyone. The next item on the agenda is the Crabgrass LSC host community agreement for 55 Sterling Street, and that is for a marijuana grow and retail establishment. And ordinarily, that would be a relatively routine thing. The host community agreement has been reviewed by town council. The only issue here is that in our initial discussions with Crabgrass, they were going to be, I believe, on the second floor. Now they're moving down to the first floor. So we have a choice. We can either put this off till next week. They are not able to be here this week. The people involved are out of town. But I imagine we could put it off till the next meeting if people wish. Or,
Yeah, I don't have a problem pushing it off till the next meeting. I mean, I'd rather, if they want to come in and speak to it, I'm more than happy to do that, if that's okay with the board, I mean.
Yeah, just for clarification, they're just a manufacturer, they're not a retail. So correct.
just,
55
oh, okay,
strong.
they're not doing retail.
Exactly.
Okay.
Not just manufacturing.
Mr.
okay.
Chairman, I mean, the terms and conditions are exactly what we've done in the past and what we, actually, we already reviewed this with
Right,
them.
the
Right.
host community agreement, it doesn't specify which floor anyway, so.
Right.
This document wouldn't necessarily change.
So
I mean, if people want to approve it tonight,
I'm,
we
I
can
mean,
do
did
that.
they mention, did they want to come in and speak to it, or?
No, I had asked because of the change of floors, based on what they initially had proposed,
Mhm.
I asked that they come in case the board had any questions. So
Oh, okay.
it's not that they were looking to come in themselves,
Oh, okay.
I asked them to in case there were any.
Oh, okay, okay.
Mr. Chairman, then why don't we just wait until,
Mr. Chair, I
Next
would
meeting.
appreciate the opportunity to ask them. If you recall, my support of this was a bit predicated on making sure that they were good neighbors to the other residents or other tenants of that building. And I just want to make sure that this move doesn't change that at all. I know they seem very willing to work with everyone else in the building, but I'd love the chance to just make sure we're still on the same page there.
All right,
I
so
guess
the
a motion-
consensus seems to be that we,
Do I put motion
table
to
until
table?
next meeting?
yeah, so if
To
you're
May
making a
1st meeting.
motion to table, why
Motion
don't,
to table.
Second.
motion's made to table the discussion with Crabgrass and the cannabis host agreement. It's been seconded. There any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And so it's tabled until the next meeting.
And Mr. Chair, they're doing the tandem permitting as well as the host community agreement, so on May 1st of the board's next meeting, they are on schedule for the planning board, so they will be in the building.
No,
great.
Next item on the agenda is a Green Communities presentation from Kelly Brown and Jim Berry. Kelly Brown and Jim Berry from the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources will provide additional information about the Green Communities Program and requirements for designation. The Montechusett Regional Planning Commission awarded a technical assistance grant to provide a community assessment for Clinton. If you would just introduce yourselves before you speak, and we'll turn the meeting over to you.
Great, so Kelly Brown, I'm the Central Mass Regional Coordinator with the Green Communities Division of the Department of Energy Resources, and I'm joined here by.
Jim Berry from Western Mass Coordinator.
So I was out here a couple months ago, giving you guys a high-level overview of the Green Communities Program, and one of the things I mentioned is adoption of the stretch code, which is the main reason that we're here tonight. But just before we get into the specifics of the stretch code, which my colleague Jim Berry is going to go over, I just think it's good because the stretch code is on the warrant for town meeting coming up, just to give an overview of the program again and the benefits to Clinton when becoming a green community.
Mr. Chair, if I could, tonight the board will be reviewing a draft warrant, and we don't have this specifically on.
Okay.
At this point, the board can put on articles that they feel are necessary. So after your presentation, we wanted to have the information for the board to consider whether this is something they would pursue at our June town meeting. So I think that was important for it to be here tonight, to hear this news.
Great. Okay, thank you for clarifying. I'd always, with 76 towns in my region, I sometimes get confused on when warrants close, so thank you for the clarification. So just to go over again, there's 240 green communities across the Commonwealth. And communities that qualify as a designated green community are the ones that are eligible for up to $20 million on an annual basis. And those funds that we give out to green communities, once again, are from RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, as well as the ACP funds, the Alternative Compliance Payments. And these funds are used towards energy efficiency type projects, such as upgrading the lighting in schools, interior, exterior LED, or improving the weatherization within municipal buildings, putting in new heating systems, and things like that. The faces that you see up here are the happy green communities that received their green community road signs when they become a green community, and as well as their grant funds. It's always helpful to look at the neighboring communities to Clinton and how they've benefited within the program since becoming a green community. So you can see up here some of your neighbors such as Berlin, Lancaster, West Boylston, and Bolton have received grant funds. Berlin and Lancaster have been a green community for longer, so they have received more green communities grant funds from being in the program for a longer period of time. When it comes to the designation and grant program, the way that it works is Clinton, if it becomes a green community and qualifies for grant funding, would be eligible for a designation grant to start off. And the designation grant is based on $125,000. It's a formula. Every designated green community starts off with that $125,000 base, and then additional funding based on the per capita and the population of each community. So when I ran the formula, the estimated grant amount that I got for Clinton would be about $150,000. Now on the earlier slide, you saw that Lancaster and Berlin had higher grant amounts. The reason this happened was because once a community spends their designation grant funds and wrap up that grant, they're eligible for future grant funds through what we call our competitive grant round. It's available once a year. Usually applications are due in March. And grants, applicants can apply for up to $250,000 through the competitive grant round. To date, if you add up all the designation grants we've given out and all the competitive grants since the program began back in 2010, we've awarded over $100 million in grant funds to those 240 designated green communities. Now, in order to become a qualified community, which means a designated green community, Clinton would need to meet 5 specific criteria. And the last time I was out here, I was going over these criteria, and I was joined by MRPC that was going to help through DLTA assistance Clinton look at meeting these 5 criteria. So I know you guys applied for that and received the District Local Technical Assistance Grant at Clinton looking to become a green community, and that Karen and John Hume over at MRPC are working on looking at 1 and 2, which is the zoning, adopting the as-of-right zoning, which I believe you guys have in play right now, but Karen is confirming with the town to see where your zoning is currently. And then the expedited permitting, which means that if someone submitted an application, they'd be able to get through the permitting process within a year's time. Criteria 3 is definitely where MRPC is going to help most, and that's putting together the energy reduction plan, which has 2 parts, putting together a baseline of the municipal usage throughout Clinton's municipal buildings, street and traffic light, and vehicles, and then coming up with a plan to reduce that baseline by 20% over a 5-year period. And the way to do that is by getting energy audits that assess those things I just talked about that we give out grant funds towards. You know, converting lighting, putting in more efficient heating systems, upgrading the weatherization. Criteria 4 is to purchase only fuel-efficient vehicles. This is where you would actually adopt a fuel-efficient vehicle policy. And when I say we, I mean the energy reduction plan, which is criteria 3, and the fuel-efficient vehicle policy, which is criteria 4, would both go before the Board of Selectmen for adoption, as well as being signed off by the superintendent. The fuel-efficient vehicle policy applies more towards administrative-type vehicles, and in the policy, there's a mile per gallon criteria depending on the type of vehicle. Certain vehicles would be exempt from the policy, such as emergency response vehicles, heavy-duty DPW vehicles, anything over 8,500 pounds. So for example, an F-250 would be exempt, and those vehicles larger. And then the last criteria is criteria 5, and that's to minimize life cycle costs, and that's the main reason we're here today. The recommended way to meet criteria 5 is through the Stretch Energy Code. The Stretch Energy Code's been around since 2009. It was put out by the Board of Building Regulations and Standards. I'm stealing a little bit of Jim's thunder here. Since it's been put out in 2009, we've had 251 communities adopt the Stretch Energy Code. This is something, as I briefly mentioned earlier on in my presentation, that does require going to a town meeting for a vote. And it is a general bylaw, so it's a little different than a zoning bylaw, but it does require a town meeting vote in order to be adopted. Now with that, I'm going to actually hand it over to Jim Barry, who's going to go into the specifics of the Stretch Energy Code.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the invitation here. In 2008, when the Green Communities Program was created, I was a member of the Board of Selectmen in Belchertown. which is, by the way, I enjoyed coming around the reservoir because I'm at the other reservoir that feeds into this one. I'm right at the Quabbin. You can almost spit at it through my back window. It's beautiful, by the way, for both areas. So I was a member of the Belchertown Board of Selectmen, and it's a small town, and every budget season we were struggling with what do we do with the radiators in our schools that are out of date, not running well, usually big circular air vents built into the side of the wall. We were in the process of asking town meeting every year for a few $1,000s to fix a few at a time, and I could see that this was going to take a long time. And I heard about the new Green Communities program that said if you jump through 5 hoops, I'm supposed to say 5 criteria, but the fact of the matter is we're trying to jump through 5 hoops to get the designation criteria, the gold star on your forehead, and you have access to money that can be spent on energy efficiency stuff. And so I went to hear a presentation. I said, if we become a green community, can we use it to fix the heating system in the school system? Oh yeah, you can do that. And get new lights. Yep, you can do that. Add insulation to the fire department? Yep. New doors on the DPW garage that are blowing out hot air all winter long? Yeah, you can. That's what you can spend the money on. So I said, well, how do we figure out how we can become a green community? So I became involved in learning about all 5 criteria with the intention of leading Belchertown through that process. And a little while later, they decided to hire some people to go out and explain the process to lots of cities and towns. And I went from a self-employed computer guy to a state employee. So I have not been around the state function for 25, 30 years. If you have any questions that begin with, why would they do such a thing? I probably can't answer that question. What I can tell you is what this program's all about, and does it work? And the answer is it does. So criteria, all 5 criteria are actually listed in the Green Communities Act legislation. So it's not something that was kind of invented by the Department of Energy Resources. It was invented by the legislature. So they listed 5 specific criteria, and it created a new division within the Department of Energy Resources called the Green Communities Division, whose only existence is to explain the program to cities and towns and see who might be interested. It's completely voluntary. You can join it and get some money, or you don't need to. It's up to your choice. The 5th criteria is one that confused me when I first heard about it. In the legislation, it said that all new construction must reduce the life cycle costs of new buildings. I said, what does that mean? Well, they have to be more energy efficient. Yeah, well, how do you insist a new home is more energy efficient? It turns out that about the only way you can insist on it or be sure that does happen is through the building code. Because if you're following the building code, then, and it's in the building code, you can actually hold someone to complying with the building code or they can't build. And it turns out, which I didn't know at the time, you may already know this, the building code with regards to energy efficiency, the whole building code evolves over time. So every few years they do a revision of the building code. There's just one in the whole state. Fortunately, many years ago, you're probably not old enough to remember, there used to be lots of building codes, and builders went concerned when they went from town to town because what's the law? So the law today is there's one building code in the state of Massachusetts, and it evolves over time. And in 2009, we were in the process of looking forward to the next revision, which was going to be more energy efficient than the current version of the building code. So they created a optional piece of the building code called the stretch code that was going to kind of stretch into the future and stretch the energy efficiency of the project. So we decided that if you adopt the stretch code, then you will comply with the Green Communities Act criteria number 5. The stretch code the current stretch code applies only to new residential construction. So if you already own a home, you're going to put an addition on, or renovations or repairs, the stretch code does not apply to you. It's for new residential construction that occurs after the stretch code takes effect. So if you were to vote on the stretch code, you would have an effective date, and any building permit pulled after that would be involved with the stretch code. But only new residential construction and new commercial construction over 100,000 square feet, which is a pretty good sized building. I'm not sure how many you have here. We don't have any in Belchertown that's over 100,000 square feet. Or a commercial building over 40,000 square feet that's of conditioned spaces, such as labs and supermarkets that have unusual energy usage. So they also have to comply with the stretch code. So again, the additions, renovations, repairs are exempt from the stretch code. When we first started in 2009, there was a lot of angst and concern about what the heck is a stretch code, who's going to know how to build it, how weird is this thing, what's it going to do, what's it going to cost, So early on, many towns and cities said, you know what, we're just gonna sit back for a year or two and see if anybody actually does this and see how it goes before we jump into it. And in the meantime, as I said, the building code does evolve over time. The standard building code kind of caught up to the stretch code. It became much less of a stretch. We say it's no longer much of a stretch. The base energy code, which came into effect January 1 of 2017, so in 2009, they were looking at the old 2006 version of the code, where we had 2x4 walls and R13 insulation. Now you have to have 2x6 walls. You have to have more insulation in the walls, more insulation in the ceiling, whether you're a stretch code community or not. So the requirements to become a stretch kind of got caught up with the base code. The standard building code has always had a couple of different options: a performance-based method and a prescriptive method. And so the prescriptives, which is what many builders have been doing for many years, which is follow the prescription, right? You get a prescription from the doctor, you go and you just do what they say. I'm not going to argue with them, I'm just going to do it. The building code has a prescriptive path, we call it, that says you do a certain kind of insulation in the walls, a certain kind of insulation in the ceilings, a certain kind of quality of windows, a certain kind of heat, and the building inspector simply checks off that you follow the prescription. There's always been an alternate path called a performance path, where you could do an Energy Star home or a passive house home. And this is a way where a builder can pick and choose a little bit of the energy features of the house, but the idea is you're going to measure the performance of the building to see if it does in fact save energy, not simply follow the prescription. So if you adopt a stretch code, what you're saying is we're only going to allow the performance path. The prescriptive path no longer becomes a possibility. You must follow the performance path. And why would you want to do performance? Well, just following the prescription may or may not guarantee a well-built house or a well-energy efficient house. Small leaks can end up with large impact in the construction. So with a performance-based system, you're not only going to check out how is the house designed and measure the performance of the design of the house, you're also going to have someone do physical tests as it's being built to make sure the ducts really are sealed well, to make sure the house is really air sealed. So you're going to measure the performance of the house, not just follow the prescription. And this is a good place to pause and say, well, what is it about the house that we're talking about? Is it everything in the house? Is it the cabinets? Is it No, it refers only to those things that relate to energy usage in the house, such as insulation, doors, windows, all those kinds of things. That small list of things is what's going to be impacted by the builder. So the process for measuring performance is a process that's been around for a number of years. It's based on the Energy Star for Home process. When I first got involved with it, I says, how do they measure that this house is energy efficient and this one's not energy efficient? Well, it turns out that many, many, many years ago, the federal government created the Energy Star for Homes program because they were trying to reduce our total energy impact, especially our imported energy. You may recall many years ago when you could only buy gasoline on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday if you had an odd number license plate, or Tuesday. No, you don't remember. That's okay. You're all pretty young fellas.
I remember that.
Do you remember? So there was a lot of programs that was instituted to try to reduce our usage of oil in particular, and imported oil. And Energy Star for Homes was a program, and it was a way where the federal government said, if you build a house that's more energy efficient than otherwise, we'll re-incentivize you. We'll give you some rebates. We'll help pay for that. And the process they use to judge, are you actually doing it, is the same process that the stretch code used, which surprised me as a selectman thinking of a government to create a new program that didn't invent a brand new one from scratch. They actually piggybacked on one that was already working. I say, good for you, thank you very much. The process resolves around 3 phases. It begins with measuring how well the house is designed with computer modeling. So if you're going to build a brand new house, you and your builder, or the builder who's building a spec house, has a design in mind about what they're going to build. And they're going to, in addition to finding a plumbing subcontractor, an electrical subcontractor, an insulation subcontractor, now they have to find a HERS subcontractor, Home Energy Rating Services. It's an expert who's been trained and only does energy efficiency stuff. And these folks have been around for a while because they were the same ones that did the Energy Star program. So you'd subcontract with one of these people, you'd sit down in front of the computer and say, how big is the house? Well, it's 2,500 square feet. 1 story or 2 story? It's 2 stories. Which way is it facing? Is it north or south? What kind of windows do you plan on using? What kind of insulation are you using? And they start measuring how energy efficient is this home? So it starts with computer modeling because it's measuring how efficient is it compared to the way we used to do business. So there's a baseline in the computer of what we used to have to do for walls, and now we're gonna do something better, so we're gonna make it more energy efficient. So you start right away with designing a home that is in fact absolutely guaranteed, if built the same way, to be energy efficient. And there's some in-process inspections. I think the next slide has some, yeah. So there's some in-process inspections that also occur. This Home Energy Rating Services Inspector will come out and look at the house being built. It doesn't replace the building inspector. It could replace the building inspector for the energy pieces of the construction, but most of the folks I see out in the fields go with the HERS rater also because they want to see what's going on. What's the insulation look like? Are we really doing air sealing? How well is that being done? So there's an in-process inspection. The duct tightness test. So if you're doing duct work for heating and air conditioning, they're going to actually test the tightness of that duct so we're not leaking heating or air conditioning. There's also a blower door test. That's what that gentleman's doing in the picture. We're going to measure, we're going to close the doors and windows when the house is built, put the house under pressure, see how much air is going out that door, which tells us where is this leaking. Now, in 2009, 2010, this is a pretty big deal for many builders. Like, what the heck are you talking about? Duct tightness? Blower door test? What if I don't pass? Well, you know, it could be a problem. But in 2014, the standard building code, when it changed, required both of these tests. So any home built in your town today, which is not a stretch code, has to have a duct tightness test and has to have a blower door test. So your builders are already hiring a HERS rater to do some of this testing. They're just not hiring the HERS rater to do the preliminary modeling and the inspection, but they do have to do the testing. So some of the stuff that in 2009, 2010, 2011 was kind of weird and new and seemed out of the ordinary, builders have gotten used to because they have to do it anyway because a standard building code requires it. So I mentioned a HERS rating. It's a score that you get. They measure the heating, the cooling, the water heating, the lighting, and the appliances, and they're measuring it against. So the bottom line here, so reference home is based on a 2006 code. So a computer contains what were the basic requirements to build in 2006 based on the building code. And every time we do something a little bit better in insulation, that thermometer drops a little bit. If we do something better with windows, that thermometer drops a little bit more. If we do a slightly better heating system, the thermometer drops more. So the idea is that the builder and the homeowner can figure out, okay, let's spend more money on insulation because I don't want to spend quite so much on windows, for instance, or let's spend a lot of money on windows because I don't want to spend so much on a heating system. So all these kinds of things impact how that score is done, and you have more flexibility on how you build it. With the prescriptive method, there's no choice. You build X amount of insulation in the walls, X amount in the ceiling, minimum of this in the heating system, and that's it. But with the stretch code, you have a little bit more flexibility as long as the goal is reached to get the house to be more energy efficient than the 2006 house. So of course you want to know what's it going to cost. Everybody wants to. It's going to cost something. You got to pay for something. Nothing's free, and that's exactly true. So this is what we call the summary page. I'm going to go to just so the. I don't think I'm going to. If you don't mind, I'm going to stand and. Don't mind. So this is what we're going to call the extra cost to build a stretch code home, and some rate gates and some cost comparative. If we go to the second page, we're going to see what this 2006 number comes from. So 2006 is a sum of some things that were done for this building. So we're looking at a typical home, 2,550 square feet, that happens to be the average size built home in Massachusetts, 2,550 square feet, 3-bedroom, single-family home, heated with natural gas. This particular one, based on the current standard code, and based on how they're normally building these things, already has a HERS code of 66. It's already more energy efficient than what we used to build in the old days. But we need to get this magic number of 255. So we've got to lower that thermometer a little bit. And the things that this builder did to get there with us, and pay for some more money, they had to get the HERS inspector involved. I mentioned today they had to get a HERS inspector to do the final testing. Now the HERS inspector is going to do the modeling at the beginning and some in-process testing. And so there's a little bit more money for the HERS rater. We put $500 on the tab for that. Also, we're going to make slightly better windows, But if you put in a 96% gas furnace, that caused that thermometer to drop a little bit, and it costs another $300. Also, the cooling system, you get a little better cooling system, that's $400. Domestic hot water, something we spend a lot of money on, just to get some hot water out. They went from a 40-gallon tank to a tankless gas hot water heater, again, trying to drive that thermometer down, and that was more money, $700. And they need much more better care to make sure that duct leakage to the outside of all the ductwork, make sure it did leak better. So it's an extra $200 in that. So the total that this builder did to decrease the energy usage costs a little bit of money, about $2,600. Notice that we did not, change how airtight it was. Early on, there was some concern about if you're making an energy efficient house and you're going to make it airtight, it's going to be a sick house syndrome. I don't know if you remember many years ago, when people were starting to put plastic under the sheetrock to keep the air out. We got mold and mildew. But we don't do that anymore. We have much better equipment to do instead of plastic, Tyvek, etc. And it's required today by the building code. The standard building code requires houses to be airtight, and the blower door test to prove it. And in the stretch code home here, they made no changes to how tight it was. They made no changes to how much insulation they used. They made no changes to ceiling insulation. So the only changes this builder made was to some equipment that had some extra cost. So if we take that $2,600 and bring it back to the front page, this is the extra cost. However, I'm sure you've all had a mass save energy audit with your own house. You get some rebates and incentives to do things. The Mass Save program has a new residential construction program that pays the builder based on what that number is as they get that curve later down. This particular one resulted in a $1,600 rebate of the $2,600 cost. So it's about $1,000 more to build a house to the stretch code in this instance. If it was automatically added to the price of the home, I don't know how your realtors and your builders price your homes here. I don't know if a $250,000 house would now be $251,000. I don't know how they do it. If that was the case, there was a 10% down payment, there would be an extra $100 on a down payment. If you add that $1,000 to the mortgage, and you have a 30-year mortgage, your extra annual payments to the bank on a mortgage would be about $77 for that $1,000. But we're going to save $213 a year in energy costs because the home is more energy efficient. So there's a positive cash flow year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4. Again, there's a commercial code. I'm not sure how much new commercial building you do in town. If it's over 100,000 square feet, it has to be 10% better than the ASHRAE code. Again, this is something that the architects would do. This is not a HERS rater. The HERS rater is just for residential. The architect would be responsible for meeting this criteria. So it applies to brand new construction of 100,000 square feet or labs and supermarkets that are over 40,000 square feet. And again, additions, renovations, and repairs of commercial buildings, as well as additions, renovations, and repairs of residential buildings are exempt from the stretch code. Once again, the picture, we're up here someplace, right? So the summary is, in 2009, 2010, the stretch code treated a lot of people. A lot of towns said, no, thank you, we're not interested. It's going to cost too much money. The builders aren't going to come to our town, they're going to go to another town. Turned out that it didn't happen, and it turned out that the standard building code caught up to it. So the stretch code is no longer much of a stretch. You do need to hire one more person, but you have to hire that person anyway to tell in. The extra cost, the extra involvement is covered, almost completely covered, by the Mass Save Residential New Construction Program. And I can't say it often enough because early on, many people were afraid that if I have a house and I'm going to sell it, before I sell it, you're going to make me bring it up to some kind of a new energy efficiency? The answer is no, it's not the case. And that's the end. I'm happy to take questions on any of those or the first criteria if you wish.
Any questions from members of the board?
No, a lot to digest. Thank you for the presentation. It was excellent.
Mr. Chair, if I could just ask, and I think Kelly mentioned that this would just be administrative bylaw adoption, but there would be some zoning changes that we may need to do. So even if we were able to get support to do this one, we still may not be in position for designation in October.
So yeah, so the stretch code, just to clarify, is a general bylaw, but does need to go to town meeting. So my understanding from Karen, and you could confirm after tonight from looking at your current zoning, is that she's under the understanding you might actually already meet it and not need to go to town meeting. There is just some piece of it of looking into the available space, but I'd be happy to follow up with her tomorrow to clarify that after tonight's meeting. And if that was the case, then you would only need to bring the stretch code. And I believe she looked at that even prior to coming the last time, just to see how much assistance the town would need from the DLTA.
Okay. No questions from members of the board? Well, thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to moving forward in this process, and rest assured that Michael will steer us in the right course in terms of
We'll get all that information, Mr. Chair, so the board will be reviewing the warrant at their next meeting. They'll be presented with it tonight, and they'll go through it the next meeting. So if we get all those questions answered, then I can give them that update next meeting and see if it's something they want to proceed with in June town meeting.
Great. And I can, definitely check with Karen and send you an email about the zoning piece so that you have that information for them when they look at putting this on the warrant as well.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Conley.
Just for the record, I want to make it clear that I will not participate in discussion or voting on this particular subject.
Okay.
Thank you. To avoid any chance of a conflict of interest, being that I'm a builder.
Contractor and builder, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for the time
Thanks.
tonight.
Next item on the agenda is order of takings for the Route 110 High Street project. The town solicitor has provided the order of takings for the Route 110 High Street reconstruction project for a temporary and permanent construction easement. One document lists the properties of owners who donated easements, and the other document lists the easements being taken by eminent domain.
I'll just give a quick introduction. So on this project, the High Street Route 110 reconstruction project, just by way of background, the project required 63 temporary easements and 31 permanent easements. That impacted 72 properties. 4 of those properties were town-owned properties, so there were 68 non-town properties impacted. So of the 59 temporary easements that were required from those non-town properties, 32 were donated. For the 30 permanent easements that we needed, 17 were donated. So the order of takings that you have in front of you, one order of taking is, even though there certain easements were donated, there's still an order of taking for those. So there's the 2 orders of taking in front of you. One is for the donated property. The other one is for the properties that are going to be getting an award that we didn't receive donations for. So there were, just to sum up, there were 27 temporary easements and 13 permanent easements that were not donated, and just for that resulted in an award of $58,982 for those easements. Because all those properties had to be appraised. We had to hire an appraiser. We had to appraise every one of those temporary and permanent easements. The big difference that I saw from this project from the Water Street project is the Mass DOT with this project required those temporary easements to be for 4 years, even though the project certainly is not going to take 4 years. And the longer you have the temporary easement, the higher the value. So that's why the values for this project tended to be higher than the Water Street project several years back. So what I'll be looking for the board tonight on those is to vote and approve those 2 orders of taking. And then once the way the process will work from there is once those takings get approved, ultimately they'll get recorded with the Registry of Deeds. The property owners that are getting awards and will then have to mail out those awards, those temporary easements to those property owners. And after all that is done, then the project will move forward.
Just to review the project a little bit, so basically this is reconstruction from Water Street. It's High Street from Water Street to Allen Street. It'll look very similar to what Water Street looks like, so it'll be full reconstruction of the roadway, drainage improvements, new concrete curbing or granite curbing and concrete sidewalks. The project is scheduled to bid right now in June, so as long as everything moves forward and everything gets approved, then this project will bid in June, probably construction late summer, early fall at the latest, I would say. And I would guess it would be about a year. Maybe it'll be the rest of this season and probably all of next season will be how long it'll take. So just additionally on these, the cost for these takings, so it's $59,000 roughly for the donation, for the awards, and then the appraisal also costs $29,000. So I'm recommending that the board, that we use Chapter 90 money to pay for those. It's similar to what we're using to design the project, and we do have that kind of money available, and it would really be our only avenue to pay them right now without appropriating money at town meeting. And the Mass Highway does allow, or Mass DOT does allow the easement process, Chapter 90 money to be used for that process, and it's quite often used. And just today, I was talking to actually the rep from Mass DOT, and she said most communities are getting now, with the new regulations, they did change the regulations from when Water Street happened till now, and with the new regulations, most communities, she said, are getting about a third donations, and we got about half, so we did a little bit better, but we were really hoping to do much better, but a lot of people we really didn't know, and tough to get a hold of. A lot of them are not Clinton residents. They're multi-family properties, so it's a little bit difficult.
A lot of the owners don't live in town. So.
Yeah. So we need to appropriate, or we need authorization to spend $90,000 of Chapter 90 money, and it is about a $2.4 million project. So it's the money to construct the project is federal and state funded, no town funds involved at all. So our requirement for these TIP projects is to design the project and secure the easements. And that's what we have to do, so that's what this 90,000.
Any questions from members of the board? There being none, what's the pleasure of the board with regard to the request for takings?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the 2 orders of takings and the funding of $90,000 plus or minus from the Chapter 90 funds.
I'll second.
Motion's made and seconded to approve the 2 takings and to authorize the expenditure of $90,000, give or take, from Chapter 90 funds. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion's carried. There you go. Good luck.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Bobby.
The next item is administrative business. We have one-day liquor licenses. Clinton Turn Vereen is requesting a one-day liquor license for events to be held at their outdoor pavilion. What's the pleasure of the board?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Second. Motion's made and seconded for a one-day liquor license for Clinton Turn Vereen. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion's carried. A one-day liquor license request from the Clinton VFW, post number 523, is requesting a one-day liquor license for their annual pig roast on May 27th, 2019. What's the pleasure of the board?
So move, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to approve the one-day liquor license for the VFW, post 523. Is there any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Old and new business, the VFW Buddy Poppy Drive. The Veterans of Foreign Wars Post 523 is requesting permission to sell Buddy Poppies at the intersection of High Street and Church Street on Saturday, May 26th, 2019, to raise funds for veterans' causes. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we grant the request to sell, for the VFW to sell Buddy Poppies at the reported intersections on May 26th, 2018.
Motion made and seconded to approve the request for Buddy Poppy sales. Is there any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. The 2019, we keep having 2018 here.
Yeah, sorry.
That's
yeah,
all right.
it's for
2019
June-
Bicycle
it's
Battling
for
Cancer
June 9th,
Ride.
yeah.
The American Cancer Society is requesting permission to, it's one of the pitfalls of word processing. you know.
Exactly.
Save yourself a lot of typing, but every now and then an old date slips through. The American Cancer Society is requesting permission to allow participants in their annual bicycle ride fundraiser to travel through Clinton along Lancaster Road on Sunday, June 10th, 2019, between the hours of 7:45 and 8:30 a.m.
I think it's actually June 9th, Mr. Chair, for this year, because that's, you were in last
Oh,
year.
so the 10th is off also.
Yeah, the 10th.
Be June 9th.
June 9th. What's the pleasure of the board?
So move, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to approve the 2019 Bicycles Battling Cancer Ride. Is there any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Draft annual town meeting warrant. The deadline for warrant articles for annual town meeting was 4/17/19. A draft warrant has been prepared for review based on information submitted to date. And we do have in our position that draft annual town meeting warrant. I assume that we will defer discussion on it until next meeting,
Yep.
when we've had a chance to review it. Is that all right with everyone?
Yes.
Mr. Jeff Swan of Clinton has sent a letter seeking appointment to the Cable Television Committee, and that request is being taken under advisement and will likely be acted on soon, to give the committee an opportunity to speak with Mr. Swan. That's sort of informational. Goals and objectives, any discussion on goals and objectives? Being none, any discussion on committee reports?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
the Marketing and Communications Subcommittee will be meeting next Tuesday, April 23rd at 7 p.m. Just a reminder, we are sponsoring a townwide cleanup day on Saturday, May 18th from 9 until noon. If you're interested or need more information, please email me at scarrigan@clintonma.gov. Furthermore, under that, some people might have noticed that the town's website has been updated. I'm very happy with the results. I will be the first to admit that it is a work in progress. We don't have an IT person in town. We don't have a webmaster, so content and updating quality control, frankly, falls to the town administrator and the department heads who have all been trained in this stuff. But it's in my opinion, it's not ideal. So if we're doing the best job we can, and there's a ton of new functionality on here. You can sign up for alerts as far as emergency notices, as far as boards and committees you're interested in, for meeting notices. I encourage everyone to check it out, clintonma.gov. But if there's a problem, please let us know, because you know, a lot of times when a commercial entity rolls out a website like this, they spend weeks and many thousands of dollars doing quality testing to make sure everything goes where it's supposed to. We are learning as we go, and I just want everyone to know, if you have any questions or concerns, email me at scarrigan@clintonma.gov and let me know. We'll get it fixed. Just, we're all in this together. So I'm very happy with the result. I thank Mr. Ward and the department heads who all underwent training to make sure their pages can serve the town as best as possible. And I'm really looking forward to moving forward with this and making sure that the web experience is everything that people in Clinton deserve. Thank you.
Okay, anything else?
If I could just add, Mr. Chair, if I could, and I appreciate Ms. Cameron saying that, we have had some citizens who have pointed out some issues, and we do thank them for that, because like we said, it's a much bigger website than we had before. So trying to go through every page and try to make sure everything is up to date or everything is included, it's been hard. The departments did go through training, but you go through it quickly, and then when you're using it, you're trying to relearn it again. And so if there is anything, certainly some departments still need to kind of beef up some of their content, and we'll get there. But the feedback is welcome. It really is, and I thank you, Ms. Kerrigan, for bringing that up.
Okay, any other committee reports?
Not so much on the committee reports, it'd be old and new business. Just wanted to bring up, I know I believe the board got an email last week from Representative Naughton.
Oh,
about the
yes,
Massachusetts
yes,
Training
yes.
Academy, so great news for the town of Clinton. Just reading off the wire here, that the Massachusetts Probation Training Academy is going to be staying in Clinton. It's going to be moving from its current location up on Chestnut Street, moving to 55 Green Street. Much bigger facility and a lot of great parking down there, so we won't have issues that we've had in the past. More employees. It looks like they're going to have a not only are they going to have the training academy there, but they're also going to have the 24/7 electronic monitoring center there, the administrative supervision unit, as well as the warrant management unit. So you're talking roughly anywhere over 2,000 employees. So I think this is, we're I think in competition with some other towns and cities. So this is a great retention for the town of Clinton and addition, because I think there's some other departments coming in there, so it's huge. And I think that's going to help out a lot of the surrounding businesses in Clinton and some of the other communities here. People going to lunch, people fueling up their cars, people shopping. So I think it's a great addition. So I just wanted to thank Representative Harold Naughton for leading the charge on that, and our other delegation as well, our two senators that represent Clinton as well. Just wanted to thank their efforts, especially Harold Naughton for his hard work. So thank you.
Thank you for remembering that. I had totally forgotten. It certainly is good news that
Yep, very
that is
exciting.
staying in the town. That's a lot of business for the town.
Yep.
Okay, anything else on committee reports? I just have the decorative lighting, the business district steering committee, which has mostly been dealing with High Street and decorative lighting. We'll be meeting tomorrow evening at 4 p.m. here in the town hall. And I think we'll be going over sort of final plans before we come to the full board, and beginning to try to get some dollars attached to what we've got planned. It is appears to me to be a very large, it's going to be quite a large project. With just, these people staying, other people moving in, it's really time for us to spruce ourselves up. And this is one of the first steps in that. So we'll have more to say about it, but we're meeting tomorrow. Anything else on committee reports? All right, the next item on the agenda is an executive session under Article 3 to discuss Public Works union negotiations. We'll go into an executive session.
Mr. Chairman, before you go call roll call, I'm going to be abstaining because I have a family member that serves on DPW, so I will not be partaking in the executive session under Article 3,
Okay.
I believe it is.
And after the executive session, we will return to open session only to adjourn the meeting, and no further town business will be discussed. A roll call vote is required to go into executive session. Mr. Kerrigan
Aye.
and Mr. Connolly,
Aye.
and chair votes aye. We are now in executive session.
Gentlemen, good night. Good night. Just one on each packet here? Yeah.